How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about surviving without a mentor. That's a big thing in corrections right now. We have a lot of senior people, they're leaving the profession, and basically the rookies, as I've mentioned before in other shows, they're really losing out on good senior staff to model from. So what I've been doing right now is trying to make a lot of videos for our rookie staff to try to fill that gap. I also worked on a book that's now an ebook called Surviving Without a Mentor. So same title as you see here. And that, let me just move this banner here. Sorry about that. And that right now is out on Amazon. You could pick that up. I think it's $25. It's an ebook. I'm sure in a couple of months, I'll also have that as a hard copy book or a soft cover book. But guys, it's got 100 amazing tips for rookies that, need that role model. And they're subtle tips. These are not tips that you're going to find in the academy. This is tips from looking back at your career and just evaluating, kind of where you're at now, taking that experience and looking back at when you were inexperienced. I also did another ebook that's out there right now, and I'll maybe do a show later in the day with 5 passages from that. And that's called Ranked Before Ready, 100 subtle survival tips for new correctional leaders, because that's also happening. You got a lot of people moving up in this profession who are relatively new, but because we're so understaffed, people are moving up a lot quicker than they have been in the past. So that book is another effort to provide tips that are, subtle tips that may be based on unwritten rules, stuff that you may not know before you take the position. They're not cookie cutter tips. And I'm working on another book right now that I'm going to ebook, because these are both on ebook right now. So you're going to have to go to Amazon and look for the ebooks. But there's another one I'm working on right now, which is a lot bigger. And it's 365 tips for anybody that wants to go, let's say, from officer or frontline all the way to administration. And it's going to be just a bunch of tips that helps you grow. So when you finally get that position in administration, if that's what your goal is, or any high-level leadership position, to be honest with you, you're ready for it. It keeps you grounded and stabilized. And guys, don't forget, I do have other books on the market, everything from tips, leadership tips, books against manipulation. You can find them on Amazon, or you can look for the books on Blue 360 Media. I have a new book that's actually available right now that's published. You can get it right now, and it's for our rookies. It's basically sort of like a daily guide for rookies. So again, that book is out right now. You could purchase it. But today what we're going to do is we're going to discuss 5 subtle tips from this book right here, Surviving Without a Mentor. I'm going to read the passage. There's 5 passages. I'll read one at a time, and I will have Russ and myself comment on each passage. So let me bring Russ in. What up, Russ?
Good morning, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good. Russ, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. I am Russ Hamilton. I am a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but I have also been a senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company that does reentry and rehabilitation work at a local county jail where I am a case manager, and also for a local probation department. I'm also the founder of Keepers of Chaos on Facebook. That's Chaos with a K. And that particular concern is where we do lots of mentorship, where we do lots of training, camaraderie, and, basic knowledge and content for everyone that's involved in correctional work. And so I'm very proud of that. And then also, I'm often found here on Tier Talk, discussing the latest, greatest of whatever we've got going here.
And Russ, I want to mention something. So me and Russ, we're trying to do our best to get a lot of material out there. So Russ is actually working on something. Hopefully we'll get out very soon. And it's going to be finally, I know we talk about it, but I definitely seen him progressing towards it. And I want to put it out there now to let people know it's in the works, because eventually it will be coming out, so people are ready for it. But Russ, you are working on a book for complacency, right? That's a topic that's very hits home for you.
Yes, I think it's going to end up being complacency and probably another, 5 or 6, concepts about things that will keep you safe or safer inside corrections. I didn't want to leave it, just at complacency because, there's some tendrils of some other things that I thought need to be, brought to bear because I see, really probably, 7 or 8 things that we could really do to, tighten up our own personal and professional safety within corrections.
Well, we're going to be excited to see those books, Russ. I will be.
Again, I'm trying.
No, we'll get it done because, again, even with the ebooks, while we're waiting for stuff to get published on the longer side, we could always put stuff up on ebook, which matters. All right, so again, I'm going to use 5 passages from my most recent book that you can find on Amazon. It's called Surviving Without a Mentor. Now, remember, guys, this is an ebook right now. A few months down the line, it's going to be a while. It will come into a soft cover book, but I wanted to get the information out as soon as possible. So let me go to the book. And I have different tips. So I'm going to actually give you the tip number so you know where to find it in the book in case it's something you want to revisit. And now, guys, the reason why we do these books is because they're supposed to be discussion worthy. So again, if when you read it, you absorb the knowledge and then you discuss it. This way it kind of, doesn't get lost. I think for me, Russ, and tell me if you would agree with this, Russ, sometimes you read a passage, but what really makes it worthwhile, even before applying it, is having discussions with people. So it starts to become embedded. Would you agree?
Yeah, one of the things that has always been helpful to me, at least, is, when I have, really anchored solid knowledge in something where I can discuss not just the facts, but the concepts relating to those facts. It often, makes me more efficient in what I'm doing. It makes me, truly understand the height, the depth, and the breadth of whatever that particular, subject matter truly is. And so I think that truly is helpful, especially if you're discussing it with other people who really know their shit.
Wow, well said there, Russ. I totally agree with that. All right, so I'm going to go with the first one, Russ. Now, Russ hasn't seen these yet. Russ hasn't have a chance to read the book, but I'm going to use tip 1 in the book. I got tip 5. I'm going to use tip 6, tip 12, and tip 18. There's no reason why I picked them. I just kind of went randomly. So the first one I got, and I don't think these were tips we've ever done on the show before, maybe except one, which I thought would be good to revisit, a little tactical. But tip 1, don't confuse silence with approval. So this is about building your inner discipline. So when you first walk into a correctional facility, silence can feel like a blessing. No one calling you out, no one writing you up, no one's pulling you aside. You assume that means you're doing something right. You take the absence of feedback as a green light. But here's the reality. Silence doesn't always mean success. It often means you're being watched. In corrections, there's a culture of observation. Staff, especially veterans, often don't rush to offer feedback or correction. Why? Because they've seen too many rookies come and go. Investing time in someone who might not make it past probation feels like wasted energy. So they stand back, they watch, they wait, and you're left to interpret that quiet however you want. Some rookies see that silence as approval and get comfortable. They start cutting corners. They think they're blending in when in truth they're standing out for all the wrong reasons. Others, more self-aware, see that silence and start to worry. They overthink. They try too hard. They seek validation in ways that compromise their professionalism. Here's what you need to know. Silence is neutral until you give it meaning. It's a test, and how you respond says everything about your maturity in the role. You may be doing everything right, but don't expect applause. In this environment, recognition is rare. Respect is earned through presence, consistency, and performance under pressure, not through praise. The officers who last the longest learn to self-assess. They know when they've held the line well, even if no one says a word. They understand that in corrections, not being corrected is often the only recognition they'll get. But silence isn't always harmless. Sometimes silence hides resentment. A partner might not correct you but they may stop trusting you. A supervisor might not say anything, but they may already be planning to move you off post. If you assume every quiet shift means success, you might miss the subtle signs that your credibility is slipping. So what do? You learn to ask the right questions, not constantly, not in a way that makes you seem insecure, but in moments that matter. After a high-stakes call, ask your supervisor, was there anything I could have done better? After working with a senior officer, ask, did I handle that all right? This shows humility, self-awareness, and a willingness to learn. The right people will respect that, and many will start offering feedback more openly once they know you're receptive to it. More importantly, you build an internal standard that doesn't rely on noise. Your code becomes your compass. You know when you cut a corner, even if no one else does. You know when you lost your temper, even if the room went quiet afterwards. You evaluate yourself based on who you're becoming, not how much recognition you're getting. And that's how you last. So because in this job, silence is everywhere. You'll walk post alone. You'll work shifts where no one says much. You'll make decisions and wonder if anyone even noticed. The question is, can you hold the line when no one's clapping? Can you trust your instincts, your standards, and your growth, even when the room says nothing? The ones who can do that, the ones who learn to lead themselves in the silence, become the ones others watch quietly, hoping to learn something. So remember this, in corrections, silence isn't a reward or a punishment. It's a mirror. What you see in it depends on what you're made of. Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
So, when I look at something like that, a lot of it rings home because, back in the day, and I think that in some ways we've gotten better at this in trying to, give people more input and more feedback. But back in the day, things just kind of unwound in a way where, people would not say shit to you for like sometimes your first 2 years or so. And so what happens is you're kind of left to your own devices and you're put into a position where you're just, assuming maybe everything is going along fine, or maybe you even know it isn't. And yet you don't really have a way to, to try and break out of that, to try and progress your professional acumen, if you will. And so this is a very difficult thing. And being able to, self-learn, self-teach, and self-review is something that if you can get even halfway decent at it, it's really going to help you along the way. What I would say is this is, be careful falling into traps, even where you are getting feedback and people are being approving, because not everyone out there is the expert that they sometimes purport to be. Take things that you learn or that you hear about feedback or that you've deduced on your own under advisement. And even though I think you should trust your judgment, keep that judgment open for review, because sometimes along your way in corrections, you'll find out that what you thought was, good tactics on your part or good strategies really truly aren't. And sometimes these are things that are just, accepted by the norm of the way that we do things, and no one bothers to question them. And just as an example, because I think examples are important, when I first came into the profession, basically every incident was a dog pile. And so, something would happen and then, we'd end up getting involved in a fight and everyone would just be, piling on, and staff and inmates were getting hurt. And it was just craziness. And over time, the department realized that that was not good, but it took years, if not a decade or more, about, really changing operational procedures to better reflect, alarm response and disturbance control. And so, don't assume that because there is a way that we do things, or like I like to say, well, we've been doing it that way, that there isn't either a lot of room for improvement, or that the way that we're doing things isn't so good after all.
That's perfect. And Russ, I want to mention something here too, just to get a little personal story of mine. I have seen, rookies have an initial bad interaction with a good, with a senior staff. Maybe the senior staff had a bad moment, whatnot, but the interaction, instead of it being constructive, maybe the senior officer was a bit more harsh, or sadly may have degraded the individual in their effort to try to correct them. So now what happens here, the rookie looks to avoid any type of interaction. They're new. They're just, I'm afraid I'm being judged. I'd rather just avoid them. And then now that silence is left in their own head to interpret. Some may look at it like, you know what? They're not bothering me today because they're comparing it to that harsh interaction. So they're assuming that's going to be possibly every interaction when they make a mistake. So because no one's bothering me, then I got to be doing something right, because look at the comparison there. Or, and also their effort to want to avoid, or some may just think, wow, they yelled at me like that, they've given up on me. So now the people that are looking at me are purely judging me. So I truly do agree with the fact that you put your own meaning towards that silence. And the best way to kind of address it is to ask the question. You may have had a bad interaction with that senior staff member, but with that said, try not to generalize it out. Like it said in the book, if there's questions that you can ask to clarify that ambiguity, because silence is that could be tough, because silence could make it feel like you're being judged, and now the problem is you don't know which way you're being judged. If I'm being judged because I'm doing it right, or if I'm being judged if I'm doing it wrong. And the best way to figure that out, if the staff ain't coming to you, is for you to go to them and just say, hey, I like we said in the thing, am I doing this okay? Is there something I could do better? I love, and Russ, I'm sure you would agree with this, because this is what we would love, when someone asks me if there's something I could do better. Because now if I'm a senior officer, I want to, oh yeah, he's humble or she's humble. I want to lean into that. I want to teach that individual. But I would say for this part here, I would really love to see senior staff understand that, silence could be very nerve-wracking for an individual. So they're going to define it maybe in either a way that makes them feel more comfortable, or it could cause more paranoia. So the best way to alleviate that ambiguity is, I think, for us as senior staff to go to those rookies and try to, not leave the silence without an answer. And I agree. But if that's not happening, then maybe you as a rookie should still try to figure out, what does this silence mean? This way you're not either getting too confident or, on the other hand, getting too paranoid. Okay.
Yeah, I have one more thing to pass on here. If you are senior staff, you should not be leaving people to their own devices. You should not be, ostracizing them. You shouldn't be, isolating them. You should be integrally involved in developing them into the correctional professional that they should be. And for me, one of the things that I tried to do along the way is point out, as things are going along and progressing, things that they have done that have been good. And you should be able to tick off several of those things, and then one thing that they could improve on. We want to give a lot of, positive. That doesn't mean that, we're going to, that we're, trying to, sugarcoat things. But what it does mean is that we want them to look at the things that they're doing and take those things and spread them out across their skill sets, so that they can understand where maybe their natural talents lie, or the things that they have been naturally doing. And then to give them one thing that they can see that didn't quite go right, that they can improve upon.
Yeah. I love that, Russ. Russ, that's spot on. And I want to mention something, because I know there's probably those rookies that unfortunately may be working around a few people that are disgruntled. It happens. Hopefully you have a good field training officer that provides or makes an effort to provide a better culture for you. But with that said, try not to generalize one bad experience into what the potential could be for every interaction or experience. Sometimes people do have bad days. It is what it is. It's corrections. Or the way Russ treated me may not be the same the way Gangi treats me. So, be careful, because we may have a habit of saying, senior officers are assholes. Why? Well, because of Russ. Well, Russ is not everyone. So don't put the fear in your heart that's how, because that one person, everyone else is going to treat you the same way. I listen, I remember those days, and looking back, it was hard, but I would have probably made more intentional effort where if one door closed, I would look for another open door, and not assume that one door represented every other possibility. All right, so that was tip number one. That's actually found in the book as tip number one. I use this one. I did this because Russ is my boy, so I got to put this in for Russ, because this is Russ's thing. This will probably be in his new book, who knows. But in tip number 5 in this book of surviving without a mentor, is build a mental what-if playbook. Now, let me read this out. And this is about building your inner discipline. So every correctional facility is full of unknowns, moments that shift in an instant. A conversation becomes a confrontation. A movement call turns into a medical emergency. An inmate who's been quiet for weeks suddenly lashes out. You can't predict everything, but you can prepare your mind for what might come. That's where the mental what-if playbook comes in. A what-if playbook is a quiet tool that strong officers use daily without ever speaking about it. It's not written down. It's not shared in roll call. It's a personal mental habit. It's the discipline of mentally rehearsing situations before they happen, so that when they do, you're not caught flat-footed. This is not about being paranoid. It's about being prepared. When you enter a housing unit, you should already be thinking, what if someone refuses to lock in when I give the order? What if a fight breaks out and backup is 2 minutes away? What if someone fakes a medical issue to bait me into a vulnerable position? When you open a cell door, ask, where am I standing? Do I have a clear exit? What if both inmates come out instead of one? Before you step into a new post, take 10 seconds to scan and think, if something jumps off right now, where do I move? What tool am I reaching for? Where's my radio, and what's my first transmission? Those thoughts aren't fear-based. They're foundation-based. They turn your mind into a scanner that's always one layer deeper than the noise. I love that. Let's read that again. They turn your mind into a scanner that's always one layer deeper than the noise. And the best part, over time, your reactions will sharpen. You'll start to respond automatically without panic, because in a sense, you've already been there. The rookies who struggle the most are the ones who operate purely in the now. They walk in reactive, waiting to see what happens, and then scrambling to respond. That works fine until it doesn't. One unexpected move, one sudden escalation, and they're in panic mode, searching for answers they never bothered to think through in advance. The what-if playbook eliminates the scramble. It doesn't give you a rigid script. It gives you options. And in this job, options mean control. Here's the bonus. Your presence changes when your mind is already prepared. Inmates can sense when you thought things through. You move differently. You stand differently. You don't jump at sudden noises. You don't freeze when someone steps too close. You don't posture aggressively. You just prepare intentionally. And you just prepare intentionally. And that's what presence is made of. Not noise, not bravado, preparation. You won't always get it right. Sometimes what happens will be the one what if you didn't think of. That's fine. That's growth. After the shift, you add it to the playbook, you reflect, you adapt, and the next time you're ready. This is how the best officers keep getting better before things go wrong. While everyone else is reacting, they're already maneuvering. While others are in chaos, they're in motion. It's not a gift. It's a habit, and you can build it one scenario at a time. So remember this. The officer who rehearses in their mind stays calm in real time. Think ahead, and you'll always stand ahead. What do you got there, Russ? That's good, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, gaming these things out with the what if game, and then later on, learning how to play the much more subtle but more what do I want to say? Creative or imaginative process of questioning the whys of things are what really help, prepare you along the way. One of the things that we want to do with the what if scenarios is we want to be able to not have to make decisions early on inside of the incident process as it evolves. And what I mean by that is everything should already be, pretty much mapped out. We know that what we're going to do in a specific situation, but we are also aware of what is supposed to happen, through the evolution of what's supposed to go on with regards to alarm response or disturbance control. And that we know that, hey, we're going to, sound the alarm. Someone's going to get on the radio. There's going to be 3 officers that are going to go pick up our 40 millimeters and our response vests, and they're going to, probably come through the gate. And we understand the way things are going. And the longer down that chain of events that we can wait to make actual decisions, because we've already made all these other decisions ahead of time. They're already, written in stone. The better off we are, because it reduces our stress. It keeps us from getting tunnel vision, and it puts us into the driver's seat, where we are the ones taking the actions that are going to suppress the incident at hand. If that makes sense.
No, yes. And Russ, you know what's funny? So I've written about the what if game. You've introduced me that years ago, and I've been able to, borrow some of those thoughts and put it in my book. Some people say I stole them, but I borrowed them. And
not like some other people and me.
but obviously there, I always have you, that's your section, that what if, maybe that could be another future book with the help of, other tools that we use to get the thoughts out quicker. But with that said, what's funny with the what if situations too? I wrote in one of my books about the difference between probability and likelihood. And it's funny because if you read these passages, the passages, they're great standalone, but I think your good knowledge comes when you find out how those passages piece together, because they never really operate in isolation. And when you look at probability and likelihood, I always tell people that probable is basically more of a priority than what's likely. All right? I want people to know that. So when I look at something, I look at what's probable, and I try not to get distracted by what's likely, because I think somewhere when it comes to what's likely is where there's paranoia. And then you start asking yourself the wrong questions that start motivating you backwards. Now, even though at first on the surface, likelihood could come out as logical, because maybe it is logical. Maybe there's a way that it connects. But with that said, if it's stopping you from, looking at what's probable and preparing yourself for what's probable, then likelihood is more of a deterrence. It's more of something that's going to get in your way from preparing yourself to get yourself in the right mindset. So I know the one thing about the what if game is, are you asking yourself the right questions that push you forward and not make you hesitant? So I've seen people like Gangi, I'm thinking of this what if, and maybe as we mentioned before, you open up a cell door, right? And all of a sudden, what about if both inmates come out? That's likely, that could happen. What would you do? Or someone will say, well, I'm going to go to open up the cell door. This whole tier starts coming after me because I'm walking on the tier. Okay, hold on. I'm not saying that's not likely. But with that said, you got to be realistic, because if not, when you play the what if game, and I've seen people play the what if game to the point where they become completely paranoid, and they start thinking of situations that it's hard for me as a supervisor to say, okay, it makes sense. I'm not saying it can't happen, but while you're so focused on what is likely but not as probable, you're now distracting yourself from being ready for what the probable could be. So I guess it's more about prioritizing. Would you agree? Have you ever seen people kind of get distracted by the what if too much when they just don't know how to kind of prioritize what is likely versus what's probable?
What I would say is this: you want to be in there and be gaming the probabilities, but probably to a much lesser degree the possibilities, because possibilities are things that you are likely very rarely or never have to deal with. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about them, but the things that you're going to look at as probabilities that can actually happen or may happen are things that you're going to actively be engaged with and actually fighting against or having to mitigate in some way. And so you can't necessarily, plan for all of the possibilities. Oh, we're going to have an incursion of 100 armed men into the institution. Possible? Yes. Probable? No. So that doesn't mean that you should be blind, but it just means that you have to game the things that you're actually going to be dealing with more, because the chances of you actually having to deal with them are so much higher. So I look at it as I would break it down probably into three parts. I would say possibilities, probabilities, and likelihoods.
I like that, Russ. I like that. And I like your example too, because it's tough, because sometimes, so I'll get a little personal real quick. My daughter, Mia, love of my life, she's very anxious, very anxious. She sees the world a lot differently than we do, which actually is a good thing until you become so hyper vigilant that you stop moving. But I always tell her, because every concern that she has, it's logical, it connects. So I want to be very careful of telling her not to worry about these things, but yet tell her not to worry about these things. Does that make sense? It's because in her mind, it freezes her. So I'll give an example, and it makes total sense. I'm walking out of a store with my daughter, and there's a van parked directly by my car. I'm not even paying attention to it. I'm just, getting ready to go. And she stops. Wait, Dad, we got to wait. I'm like, what's going on? She goes, we can't go to your car right now because there's a van, and they like to put people in the van. So if you open the door, they're going to pull you in. I said, okay, Mia, hold on here. I'm not saying that can't happen. And I love the fact that you thought like that, because that means that, you're thinking, I get it. I said, but man, in my head, I'm thinking there's truth to that. But I don't want her to live in a life to the point where she's so paranoid that it freezes her, because she literally stopped moving. So I think there's a balance in how you have to address the person that can't distinguish between a possibility or a probability and a likelihood. But you got to be very careful that you also don't turn them off, because it's connected to something that makes sense. So what I decided to do is I accept her perspective, and we waited. And that's what we did. We waited, and within 5 minutes, we were lucky. The van left, and we went through and moved through. But I did ask her this. I said, Mia, just to think for next time, you notice that when we thought of this, we stopped moving forward. So I just want to make sure that you don't get to a point where you're asking things in your head that stop you from moving forward, because that's when the anxiety becomes a concern. Because it starts to affect your daily life. And the same thing with the what if games. You in corrections always have to be motivated to move forward. Always. That's the key. So if you're playing this what if game, and the what if game is not founded on your effort to move forward, I think you're playing it wrong. Would that make sense, Russ? Safely move forward.
Yeah, I look at it as, what would be for me, a logical control point. You've got a van out there at this point. Is it reasonable to have a control point where I call 911 because of the van? Obviously not, right? Is it worth my time and effort to maybe make sure that I go out and I give some room there, and I identify people that might be around there? Yeah, that is a legitimate thing that I can do that's within my control. And then there's things that, move along between these points. I can't tell you how many times I've been out in public, and one thing that seems concerning at one moment that I feel like I can navigate around suddenly does become that point at which I start dialing 911. And it's happened to me an inordinate number of times. But that's what we have to do, is we have to understand what we can control within the moment, and and what our action is going to do that potentially limits us. When we stop moving or we stop taking any action, then we just have to look at what happens physiologically. It's fight or flight or freeze. All right. So freeze, not a good option. Right. Are there other things that we could do because maybe, we're not actually for sure in an emergent situation? That's a lot more important. What those other small level tactical things can bring us to that are within our personal control.
Hey, Russ, man, what you said about the call 911, man, you know how powerful that is, that we could maybe even do a show about that? Because I'm talking about the thought itself. So, Russ, what I just got from you, and you may not even realize you laid out this nugget, but I got to give this nugget out there, because there's a point where I said it stops you, right? So that's where, let's say, now, guys, apply this to the what if in correction, but I got to use my daughter as a scenario here because I'm going to build off what Russ said, but it applies in the correction setting, just different situation. But all right, so I said it stopped us, right? I said it stopped us. It froze us, right? And then you mentioned the 911. So there's a point when either it stops you and you move forward under your own control, or it stops you and you move under the control of the situation, so of the pressure of, like calling, it's so overwhelmed with my daughter. Maybe she does call 911 and there's really nothing there in the context that said she needed to, except for the van being parked there. So I'm thinking, even with the what if playbook, you start playing these games in your head. And then I guess maybe you're right, Russ. There's three things that occur. One is you motivate yourself forward, which is what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Or you overwhelm yourself so much with these likelihoods of impossibilities that you freeze because you don't know what to do. Or the last thing is you're so overwhelmed with paranoia that you become victim to the pressure of the situation, and you may not realize that the situation now is telling you what to do, and you have no control or no effort to stabilize the what if. I think that's I know that happens. I've seen people play the game to a point where they come up with these scenarios that it makes sense because it's connected, but the likelihood, and then you don't want to tell the person, that's never going to happen because maybe, but so yeah, that was good, Russ. I love that little 911 thought because it made me think. That was good. I wish I would have thought of that when I dealt with her at that point. That was good, man. That's why we do these shows, guys, so we learn in the process. So, Russ, I don't think we've ever discussed this tip, so you'll find this tip as tip number 6. I think we've kind of touched on it, but never in detail like this. So stay one step quieter than the noise around you. This is, again, about inner discipline. So when tension rises in a correctional facility, the volume rises with it. Radios click to life, voices sharpen, keys jingle faster, the unit shifts, and the natural instinct, especially for rookies, is to raise your voice to match the energy around you, to speak louder, to move faster, to project authority by meeting the noise head on. But here's the tactical truth. In high-stress moments, real control lives one step quieter than the chaos. Not silent, not withdrawn, just quieter, intentionally so. There's power in contrast. When everyone else is escalating, the person who remains composed becomes the center of gravity. You become the person others subconsciously calibrate to. You steady the pace, you slow the reaction, and in doing so, you begin to own the environment rather than just exist inside it. This is so key. I just want to read this part again. There's power in contrast. When everyone else is escalating, the person who remains composed becomes the center of gravity. You become the person others subconsciously calibrate to. You steady the pace. You slow the reaction. And in doing so, you begin to own the environment rather than just exist inside it. This isn't about whispering commands or being soft-spoken. It's about learning how to command presence without panic. It's about developing a tone, posture, and pace that communicates. I'm not surprised. I'm not rattled. I'm in control, because inmates don't just listen to what you say. They watch how you move under pressure. Let's say an inmate starts yelling at another staff member. Let's say an inmate starts yelling at another. So I guess another inmate. Another staff member's voice shoots up. Cut it out. The situation's hot. Instinctively, your adrenaline wants to match that heat. But what if instead you stepped in with a low, firm, deliberate tone and said, step back now? No yelling, no tension in your voice, just a controlled command. The contrast disrupts the rhythm. It signals authority through calm. It takes space, not by overpowering, but by anchoring. That presence, that's presence. And presence is what makes people listen. Now, why does this work? Because when people are on edge, they're looking for a signal. If your energy escalates with theirs, you become part of the problem, another chaotic input. But when you lower your energy intentionally, you create a new rhythm. You send the message, this situation is going to de-escalate, and I'm already there. Veteran officers who mastered this don't just project control, they become the safest person in the room. Without having to say it, they don't bark orders or rush movements. They slow everything down by slowing themselves down, and everyone, staff and inmates, feel it. This doesn't mean every situation should be met with quiet. There are times when you'll need to raise your voice, give sharp direction, or take immediate action. But if that's your only gear, you're not in control. You're just reacting. Mastering the art of being one step quieter is about discipline. It's about resisting the urge to match chaos with chaos. It's about trusting your presence more than your volume. So practice it. When the unit is loud, drop your tone. When things move fast, slow your pace. When voices rise, speak just below them, but with clarity. Don't get lost in the noise. Cut through it by being still. In time, people will start responding to you without you having to raise your voice. They'll start adjusting to your presence before you even speak. That's the mark of someone who controls the environment, not just reacts to it. So remember this, the strongest officers in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who makes others quieter without saying a word. How you like that one, Russ?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and that is a really good point. But I think it needs some nuance to flesh it out. What we do in correctional settings, or what happens to officers out there in the street. It's really good, if you have the chance to look at incidents as they're going on, whether that's through videotape or checking out some of these YouTube channels that have a lot of the street level officers reacting to things. And in some departments or in some situations, you will see things start to really unfurl and get uncohesive. You'll see, people, multiple people barking orders to one individual, and it really, clouds what should be bringing clarity to the situation. And so, and in those things, you'll also see, some bad things like, people, lasering a guy with their gun, because street level cops have usually a lot more to worry about with regards to crossfire and things like that. And the situation gets very chaotic, and there's always going to be a couple of people there, and they may not be the ones that usually lose their shit, but sometimes, people do get overwhelmed. So I'm not trying to point out individuals in this case, but what you have to do is you have to put yourself into the position where you are operating optimally, right? And so to operate optimally, taking things down a notch until it's time to take things up a notch is always the best solution. And so before we get to that point where we're taking things up a notch, what are we doing? We are observing the situation, and we're observing the situation so that we can orient ourselves to the situation. And then we are in a position that we are going to make a decision, and then we are going to act. And then we are going to go back to the beginning of that OODA loop. And we're going to start once again with observation so that we can follow that whole chain of things. You're going to observe, orient, decide, and act. And that is going to happen over and over and over again, even inside of a single incident. And so as we do those things, rather than staying at the middle part of that where we haven't quite decided, and we've just decided to orient, and we're starting to give commands, and then what happens? People just get stuck there and they just keep giving commands. And what they've done is they've short circuited that OODA loop process, and it puts them to that point where they can never get to the point where they make a decision, or they make a decision, but they're still not acting on it. And that's problematic. And it happens a lot, though. And it even happens to good, experienced officers. So you get to that point, and I know I'm willing to take some heat on this, because some people may not like the way I couch this, right? But there is such a thing as de-escalation through escalation. And sometimes you just have to get there, because that is the safest thing to do within the moment. And there's not a bunch of time to let the situation get worse before you have to bring in even more resources to make it better. And so that's where really good, sound correctional judgment actually comes in.
And you know what, Russ? I was also thinking de-escalation, because as I said, when people talk about de-escalation, a lot of people think you're only talking about de-escalating an individual. Really, it's the situation itself. The individual happens to be a part of that situation. But de-escalation is everything from controlling the environment, which includes the individual, to hopefully a peaceful resolve. But with that said, I really can't say much more. You already added what really complements this passage well. I mean, as I said, I have seen officers try to match the energy or go above it, because they believe their presence at that point made to kind of go above the yelling and the screaming or the aggressiveness of the inmate. But now you're kind of taking it up from assertive to aggressive, because now you're just overwhelming and adding, as opposed to kind of stepping back and just really taking a breather, if you can, if it's not emergent, to reevaluate and make sure that, one, you're not trying to make the matter worse by now you're overwhelmed, so you feel that you got to speak louder. And the other thing is also to make sure that, I know a lot of people just take it as a win-loss as well. You know, you're yelling at me, I'm going to yell back at you. And now it's really nothing about presence, but more about it's performative, if that makes sense. You ever see like a officer and inmate go back and forth, and they're both yelling and each one's getting louder and louder? And it's like, hey, guys, the officer lost their presence a long time ago, but you're just performing for the crowd. That's what they're doing. You know, they're just trying to win back their ego. And I think sometimes we all get caught up in that. You know, that's the part where in corrections, you always got to make sure that your emotions don't get the best of you. And there is a spectrum of authority that we talked about, being assertive to being professionally empathetic. You don't want to fall into being aggressive or over sympathetic. But I think when it comes in here, it says stay one step quieter than the noise around you. There's just so much in there. I mean, thanks, Russ, for unpacking that, because there's just so much in there. Because in the end, if someone is able to step one step quieter than the noise around them, I think to me that does show somebody that's in total control. And I just love that. I love this thought that I know we've discussed, but we just never used that, discussed it in this way. But I love when it talks about how it stands out because of how it contrasts. The whole unit or whatever it is, or there could be a loud back and forth, and then someone comes in and represents the other side of that spectrum. And automatically everybody looks towards that individual. You know, the person that's calm, that person does become the center of gravity. And I truly believe that, because I remember, you know, even young in my career, where you would have people that, I remember a lieutenant that just had a calmness about him, and not a detachment. I want to make sure we get that out there. It's still someone that was actively very involved and very invested in any outcome that we were trying to produce. But he had a sense of calmness, and that when he would walk in, there was his presence that just, it felt, I don't know, that we were going to get through it. It just felt good. And even the inmates knew. But he walked in with just a sense of calmness, and just, you just saw control. So again, if you're trying to match, or like Russ said, trying to go above, you know, unless it's needed, I get it. But if you're trying to match or go above, I think there's also a level where you are reacting. And when you are reacting, you do lose a sense of control, because now you're being driven by the situation. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Now, 2 more left. I'm going to go to tip 12 on this one. I thought this was a good one. And it's called Don't Follow Cliques, Follow Patterns. Just about awareness, reading people in the environment. Russ has discussed this a few times too. So when you're new to the job, finding your place feels urgent. You're trying to read the room, understand who has influence, who gets respect, and most importantly, where you fit in. You'll notice that every facility has its cliques. Certain officers always post up together. Certain voices dominate conversations. Certain people get the inside scoop on everything before it's official. And naturally, you're going to feel pulled towards those groups. Sometimes it's for survival. Other times it's for connection. Either way, the temptation is the same. If I align with the right people, I'll be okay. But here's the caution. Don't follow cliques, follow patterns. But here's cliques operate on surface connection. Patterns reveal actual behavior. A clique might make you feel accepted, but patterns show you who's really reliable. A clique might offer jokes and camaraderie, but patterns show you who respond when it counts. A clique might make noise in the break room, but patterns show who document, who de-escalates, and who protects the mission when no one's watching. Your career and your safety depend on your ability to observe behavior, not just affiliation. Let me just scan here where Russ comes back. Watch how people operate when things go sideways. Watch who shows up during incidences and who disappears. Watch who consistently models integrity, even if they're not popular. If they're not popular. Watch who avoids gossip, who trains new staff with patience, and who leads without needing a title. Patterns over time will tell you what a person is made of. They'll show you who's steady, who's reckless, who's checked out, and who's just putting on a show. Because here's the hard truth. Some cliques are built on shared bad habits, laziness, negativity, cutting corners, gossip. They create a culture that feels like unity, but it's really group decay. And once you attach yourself to that, your name and your choices get filtered through that reputation, whether you meant it or not. On the flip side, there are people who walk alone, not because they're antisocial, but because they don't compromise. They've earned quiet respect. They may not say much, but when they speak, people listen. When something happens, people look towards them. Those are the people you want to learn from, even if they're not inviting you in. And don't confuse being liked with being trusted. Plenty of officers are liked because they're entertaining, sarcastic, or laid back. But when real pressure hits, when something dangerous unfolds, or a hard decision has to be made, it's not the liked officers that people look to. It's the consistent ones, the ones whose patterns proven and present. So here's your move. Watch more than you speak in your first few months. Observe without judgment. Take mental notes. Who backs their words with actions? Who changes depending on who's watching? Who helps without asking for credit? Then build your own path, not around who makes the most noise, but who models the most growth. Remember this. The loudest voices aren't always the strongest. Pay attention to patterns because reputation fades, but behavior repeats. Russ, what's your thoughts about that?
So, yeah, I think that's really, really good, actually. One of the things that you're going to find, though, in corrections is that all of these little cliques are still going to be people that you have to interact with, right? And so you can't isolate yourself from them, at least not entirely. You just have to figure out, which thing is it that you want most to be a part of. And my sincerest hope would be that you would want to, be out there doing good correctional work. Everything else that I won't say most cliques, because that's not necessarily true, but that some cliques do is their existence is for justification to engage in the activities or mindsets that they want to do. So if you have, this clique of negativity out there, who, who it's always about, oh, I'm living the dream, as it were. And I've said that myself. So I'm not exempt. But to live in it and stew in it and to, just decide that, hey, things are so bad that we're justified for not being, proactive and preemptive and all of those other things that we should be. doing, then you are hurting yourself professionally. And so what you want to do is you want to try and find and align yourselves and be eclectic with the people and the circles that you engage with, and take away from those people the best of what they have to offer. Maybe some of the people in the negative clique do have some, funny jokes, and funny ideas, and maybe you can take a little bit of that away and make, the day and the people around you a little more humorous. But you also want to be able to, look at those people who are the hard chargers that are looking to be the impact people, and say, hey, I want to, take that, either the work ethos or their abilities to, to find contraband, or to put down a riot, or deal with difficult individuals. Maybe I can model some of that. And so if you become eclectic in the things that you take away from people, and then you eschew the parts that they have about them, because even the best officer has something bad about him. Believe me, I'm right there. And then you do your best to refuse to engage in those types of mindsets or behaviors or whatever it is, the more of a sharp instrument that you're going to be. And so that's what we want. We want sharp instruments, and we don't want to fall into cliques that aren't pro-social, pro-correctional, pro-professional, if you will.
Yeah, and Russ, I've written about this in my books before too. Basically, we do at the very beginning have a want to belong, and sometimes that want could supersede our logic. Technically, I think that some people in corrections, because corrections can be a very lonely profession, more so at the very beginning of your career. As he said in the earlier tip, sometimes you don't have the most inviting staff when you come in, so you could feel alone, and then you look for any body to say that you're welcomed, and it makes sense. It's human. But with that said, you got to make sure that you don't sacrifice any principles in the process. That's why I always tell people you got to kind of know who you are going in, and connect yourself to the people that can help you reach your greatest potential. Because at the very beginning, first off, your reputation will always matter, because eventually you may want to move up, and the people that you connect to matters. Because later on, you're going to be judged by those people that you've connected to. So with that said, I think this is a great piece of advice, because I think we all go through it. And then sadly, that group, it could start to change us, because we're going to be so overwhelmed with the want to belong, the want to be accepted, that group dynamic can change who we are. And the next thing you know, we're just coasting in this profession because we're just hanging out with the wrong people, because ultimately we become that person who looks to be accepted or looks to be popular. But again, this is a career where if you wind up doing it that way, there are so many sacrifices that you're going to make along the way that's going to take you away from who you really want to be. And there's another passage in this book somewhere further down that talks about this same perspective about patterns and stuff, but it goes from as if you're observing inmates. But it talks about also, not trying to be popular or whatever it is, because at the end, then you're looking for someone else's approval to do your job. So this is a powerful one. I think this is one that a lot of people do go through at the very beginning. Again, that's why we as senior officers got to understand that this is a bit of a battle for a rookie. So we need to make sure that we make the environment something that can help them, and not, eliminate some of these obstacles for them. So here it is right there. That's an obstacle. So you as a senior officer, now that you know it, what are you going to do, to help eliminate that? Because now I made you aware, and same thing for the rookie. Now you're aware. See, the rookie has to be aware so they know to look for it. The senior officer has to be aware so they know to remove it. That's the key. All right, last tip, Russ, for the day. Maybe we'll do a show later on today, depending on how it goes. We'll do one with the I'll take 5 topics from this book. 5, and this one's called Rank Before Ready. That book is also out, and it's for first-year supervisors. Subtle tips, very similar to, format-wise from the book we're reading from now, which is Surviving Without a Mentor. All right, so now, and again, these got both available on ebook right now. Let me go ahead and remove that. All right, now here's the last tip. More of a mental health tip. Don't carry yesterday in today. So this is about, again, your inner discipline. One of the most important mental skills you can develop in corrections isn't tactical or procedural. It's psychological. It's the ability to let go of yesterday before you walk into today. This job builds pressure day by day, shift by shift. Things compound, mistakes, tension, unresolved conflict, inmate behavior, staff drama, personal stress. If you're not careful, that weight follows you through the gate. It clings to your posture, affects your tone, clouds your decision, and the worst part, half the people around you won't even notice you're carrying it until it explodes. You might still be thinking about how a supervisor embarrassed you on the radio, still irritated from how a partner didn't back you up, still shaken from a close call, still frustrated from something small that felt bigger than it should have been, and still thinking about the inmate who got under your skin. And without realizing it, you carry it forward into a new unit, into a fresh shift, into a conversation with people who have nothing to do with yesterday's weight. And slowly your presence begins to shift. You're short when you don't mean to be. You assume the worst in others. You start reacting to ghost, treating today's moment like it's still yesterday's enemy. That's when mistakes happen. That's when you push when you should have paused. When you bark when you should just breathe. When you isolate because you think everyone's out to get you. But in reality, you're just trapped in something that it's already ended and refusing to leave it behind. Here's the truth. This job will give you plenty to carry. You don't need to bring extra. Letting go of yesterday doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means learning how to reflect, learn, and reset. It means creating mental space between shifts. It means making a conscious decision that was yesterday, this is today, and I'm not letting one bad moment write the next chapter. You can't control what happened on your last post. You can't erase the way someone treated you. You can't rewrite the report you already submitted, but you can choose what mindset walks in with you for the next shift. Create a ritual for it if you have to. Sit in your car for an extra 2 minutes after your shift. Write down one thing you're letting go of. Breathe before you walk back into the facility and say to yourself, new shift, new moment. And if something hasn't been resolved, talk about it. Process it. Speak to someone you trust. Don't let unresolved frustration grow legs, because if you don't unload it in the right place, it will show up in the wrong one. Some of the best officers you'll ever meet aren't the ones who avoid conflict. They're the ones who refuse to carry it forward. They protect the shift with their mindset. They walk in clean, focused, and present. And presence is everything. Now, remember this. You can't lead in the moment if your mind is still stuck in the past. Walk in clean, because every shift deserves your full attention. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
I think that the things that happened to us yesterday, and the fact that, we so often bring them forward in negative ways, and we let them become, barriers, or we let them become speed bumps. And what we do with those things so often is, either we stagnate or we regress in our professional growth, right? And that's something that we want to, really try and avoid. So, we really have to use those things, not as barriers or as speed bumps, but we want to use them, as ladders and trampolines to move ourselves forward. And so, it really becomes, a process of, it really becomes a mental process in order to try and take those things and understand, hey, I can learn from these things. I'm not stuck at that level. This is not going to be what I am every single day. And so, every new shift we can look at as a chance to rise to the challenges, or we can look at all of those challenges as obstacles and then just, stop and be stagnated at that point in perpetuity. And we're all gonna reach those plateaus, if you will, in ways where we're momentarily not going to be ready to breach that obstacle, because we don't understand that it's an opportunity, that it's a challenge, and that it's something that we can rise to. the quicker you get your mental mindset on that and understand um, that we can turn those negatives into those positives. And I really truly mean this because I've managed to make it so in so many ways in my own life. Is that that is where real growth starts to happen. There are a lot of people that progress um, through the things that we see inside corrections, but it's not. But it's not growth that really counts for anything. You can get all of the certificates and you can do all of the IST hours and you can do, X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't mean that you're making, significant personal and professional growth. What really matters is when you encounter something that most other people would be stopped by, when you find the way to adapt, overcome, and be victorious over it. That's what really counts. And so, this whole thing, carrying yesterday into today, if you are focused on the fact that you did not succeed, if you're focused on the fact that you had a failure, that's where you end your growth at, instead of focusing on, now I have a chance and a challenge and a real possibility that I'm going to be able to really make a difference in my growth curve.
Yeah, and guys, I want you to know this is a very intentional effort. I mean, we've kind of touched on these topics before. I mean, with over 1,700 videos. I mean, we've kind of had our hands in most topics, but this is a very intentional effort that allows for some omission of vulnerability. Because again, you're going to have days that are going to affect you. And with that said, you can't push it down by becoming sarcastic against it or trying to step up a little bit more with some fake bravado. I've seen it, or joke it off as if it didn't get to you. I mean, these moments are going to get to you. And I think the courage comes from admitting that and then doing what you can to address it. I think a lot of the times people think courage comes from deflecting because they're more concerned about being accepted by their peers. So that's not courage, guys. Courage, I think, really is at this point being vulnerable and helping your peers that will help you through it. That's, I think, the shift in corrections since I've been here. Since 2002, there's been a real big shift on embracing vulnerability. It's been a frontline push. Hopefully management accepts it. But I really do think that was a frontline push in my career. And management then realized, hey, you know what? This is correct. And then you also started seeing management hopefully embracing some level of vulnerability. But to me, that's the only way that you can let one day go and enter the new day with a reset, is addressing it. And then if need be, finding help that helps the person, not the position. That's another thing. I need someone to help me to wear the uniform, and not someone to help me carry the uniform at that point. So there was a lot, guys. There's a lot of tips in the books. There's 100 in this book. It's about 300 pages. I think there's a lot of good information here. I think these are the tips that you're not going to be taught about in the academy. But I also think for senior officers, or even management, you got to read this stuff, because these are lessons that your people are going through in the moment. So maybe you can make the environment better by just reading that passage out loud or something, making people aware, because sometimes we're so caught up in the routine that we're not aware of what we're doing right in front of us. So sometimes it's good to wake people up and say, look at this. This happens every day. What's going on? How do we address it? I think the first way we address it is by knowing it exists and admitting it. And then where's our part in rectifying it? And again, I think for the rookies, this book, a lot of the topics here make you aware, but also for the senior officers, it's to make you aware. But I think for the senior officers and the rookies, it's what do you do together to take advantage of what the lessons are here to make it a better environment for the rookies that are coming in. For the book that maybe we'll discuss later, me and Russ, if there's time later, I'll put out another one. We're going to do 5 tips from the other book of kind of being thrown into rank. And again, we're going to talk about subtle little supervisory tips that you really don't learn going in, but rather learn once you're doing it. And I think these are good lessons to learn, because I don't think these are lessons that me and Russ had going in. These are lessons that me and Russ have found out, discovered. So imagine, being able to go back and looking at this and then going back and say, hey, you know what, this is a great nugget here. Let me go ahead and throw it towards the rookies. Let me go ahead and throw it to our first year supervisors, because, why do they have to go through the same mistakes that we went through to discover it, when we can go ahead and give them a little bit of, some knowledge there to avoid those mistakes. Ain't that what we're about? I know you can learn from mistakes. I get it. But I think that if we can help each other get through it, I think that if there's times where I learned something that was valuable, I could share the lesson of what was learned by, not having someone go through the same failures that I've gone through. Why would we not want to do that as our brothers and sisters keeper? I just, that sink or swim, man, that sink or swim. It still exists today. Hey, Russ, anything you like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think this has been a really good conversation. People, you should hit me up. Maybe I'll start, trying to do some, oh gosh, how would I put this? Maybe we can do some life skills coaching or correctional skills coaching or something like that. Who knows what this might evolve into? The second thing I want to say is, man, don't learn from your own mistakes. Learn from other people's mistakes. That's really key.
That's, you know what, Russ, man, we're always on this. That's what I was trying to say. Wasn't I trying to say that?
I tell you what, I say that all the time. I said, you know what, you're far behind the curve if you're learning from your own mistakes. Learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, I knew what I was talking about. I was like, no, let me take the mistake for you. Learn from it. Yeah, that's what, man. Thanks, Russ. You should write a book. All right, as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Don't forget, please subscribe, interact again. Oh, one last thing, guys. I haven't had a subscriber for a whole month. I don't know what's going on. I get a few, then I lose a few, and then it equaled out to 0 one whole month. And I know the information's here. I know it's good information. I know I posted recently on the Washington DOC page, and I post a few times a week, and someone had posted up, why don't we just make this an Anthony Gangi page? And it was kind of just, and then one guy commented, yeah, it looks like he posted up 20 times already. Again, however many weeks I posted that. And I didn't get into the debate, sort of. I just said, you know what, it's content. Why don't you watch it before making judgment? And there were some people that agreed that the content was, of course, good. So there's always people that have your back. But sometimes we're putting out this content into a world that for some reason either doesn't want to be open to it or doesn't even want to listen to it because they're too into their own. But guys, anybody could be putting up content. Anybody, if they want to. I remember when they had the New York strike and they're like, hey, Gangi, you got to do something about it. You do something. Put up a YouTube channel. You speak your mind. It takes a lot of courage to go out into the world and introduce these thoughts, especially into the world of corrections where people could be very cynical. But with that said, we continue to do the mission. We continue to provide good information. One, because it's good information. Two, because it's healing. It allows us to vent. It allows us to debrief, if you will. I know me and Russ have this urge where we know there's good advice and we want to give it. We have to give it. It will bother us. We'll stay awake. We just, hey, can we do something real quick? I just got to get a thought out. And whether people are receptive to it or not, it's just more about us releasing that thought into the world. So I would like to hope that somewhere along the line, because I know the videos are being used. I just got a message right now about someone that's going back into corrections. And I guess he remembers his sergeant introducing him to my stuff. So he's just asked on the message, how many books do I have out? And I gave him a list of books. And he said, hey, just want to let you know, the sergeant that introduced me to your stuff has been retired for a year, living a great life. And I'm thinking, yeah, hey, Russ, do you know that Tier Talk started? You were my third guest. You were my third guest on Tier Talk. My first was Gary Cornelius. You were my third. And it was funny because back in the day, Russ, I had no idea what you looked like. You had this picture of, I think, yourself holding a weapon with a blue shirt or something. I forget. I didn't know what you looked like. And I really didn't know for a while what you looked like because we didn't have this Zoom stuff. We did it through the radio when I worked for the radio station, whatever the show, whatever the radio place. My mind's going blank. New Jersey Blue Now or Blue Now. That was coming. Blue Now. So I remember, just sharing the thoughts, bringing authors on, bringing people that had some influence in the profession. I know you were very well written, not because you had a book, but your comments on Facebook and stuff were just so well written. And I was very attracted to the writing. And I said, I got to get this guy on. And I didn't think you were ever going to come on because you wouldn't show your face. Now, again, it's a radio, so it wouldn't matter. But you immediately came on and you hadn't yet retired yet. That was a few years later. But what was funny is, Russ, we've been doing this for so long. I talk to people now that they're lieutenants, supervisory roles, administration, and then all of a sudden, like I'm doing this side gig for a production company, and you're calling people to connect with them, and there are people that already know who you are, they're familiar with their stuff, they give it to their staff, and you're sitting there like, that's pretty amazing. That's 13 years. That's half of my fucking career. That's half of my career, more than half. And to know that, I've been doing it for that long, but with the team that we have, it's amazing. And I'll be honest with you, there's nothing that someone could post on a board that's going to make me stop doing it. The same thing with Russ, because that would mean if I decided for one superficial comment to stop me from moving forward or stop us from moving forward, that would make me question my 13 years of investment. Russ's 13 years. Everybody that's ever done this show's 13 years of investment. So just for the haters out there, there's nothing that you can say that's going to make me look back at my 13 years of doing this, the books we've written, the knowledge we've given out, the people that have said that knowledge has helped them become better at what they do, which means that they're more effective at safety and security, saving lives. When they were down and out, they found videos that lifted them up. So you could say what you ever want, whatever you want to say on a superficial level, but it will never match the heart that has come back to me, the love for what we've done, the lives that we have changed, and just how much we have grown. So go ahead. You could say you don't like the content, but we'll go ahead and still keep on doing it. It's what we do. We're correctional professionals. When we fall down, we find another way to get back up. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Love you. Stay safe. All right, Russ, I'm going to